The US Vice President says the ball is in Iran's court if it wants to agree to a deal to end the conflict in the Middle East.
Wakil Presiden US mengatakan bahwa keputusannya kini ada di tangan Iran jika ingin menyetujui kesepakatan untuk mengakhiri konflik di Timur Tengah.
The comments came after the US began a blockade of ports on the Iranian coastline yesterday.
Komentar tersebut muncul setelah US mulai melakukan blokade pelabuhan di garis pantai Iran kemarin.
J.D. Vance also called on the Vatican to stick to matters of morality after President Trump heavily criticized the Pope.
J.D. Vance juga meminta Vatikan untuk tetap berpegangan pada masalah moralitas setelah Presiden Trump mengkritik keras Paus.
Mr. Trump is refusing to apologize for calling Leo XIV weak on crime and terrible for foreign policy.
Trump menolak untuk meminta maaf karena menyebut Paus Leo ke-14 melemah terhadap kejahatan dan sangat buruk dalam kebijakan luar negeri.
Pope had condemned the war against Iran. Catholics in New York and Chicago gave their reaction to the ongoing spat.
Paus sebelumnya mengecam perang terhadap Iran. Umat Katolik di New York dan Chicago pun memberikan reaksi mereka terhadap perselisihan yang sedang berlangsung ini.
I stand with the Pope. I mean, the Pope speaks the gospel. He speaks for peace.
Saya mendukung Paus. Maksud saya, Paus menyampaikan Injil. Dia berbicara demi perdamaian.
Do I feel that Pope Leo has a right to suggest there is an end to the war? And absolutely, that's his job, is peace.
Apakah saya merasa Paus Leo berhak menyarankan agar perang diakhiri? Tentu saja. Tugasnya memang menciptakan perdamaian.
Our president, who theoretically represents all of us and our country to the world, can't find a way to be more diplomatic to another leader in the world that a lot of people look up to.
Presiden kita yang secara teoritis mewakili kita semua dan negara kita di mata dunia tidak bisa bersikap lebih diplomatik kepada pemimpin dunia lain yang dihormati banyak orang.
That's the Trump way. The New York way is to be a little more brash, and I don't think he cares who he goes up against, and I don't know. We got to do better.
Itulah gaya Trump. Gaya New York memang sedikit lebih kasar, dan saya pikir dia tidak peduli siapapun yang dia hadapi.
Trey Popat is the US politics reporter for The Guardian in Washington, and he told us how people have reacted to Mr. Trump's feud with the Pope.
Trey Popat adalah reporter politik US untuk The Guardian di Washington, dan dia memberitahu kami bagaimana reaksi orang-orang terhadap perselisihan Trump dan Paus.
I think the president is kind of figuring out that miscalculation as the hours go on. The Pope has been pretty diplomatic and resolute in his remarks back.
Saya pikir Presiden mulai menyadari kesalahan perhitungan ini seiring berjalannya waktu. Paus bersikap cukup diplomatik dan tegas dalam pernyataan balasannya.
He's not afraid of the Trump administration, that he isn't willing to debate the president going forward.
Paus menyatakan bahwa dia tidak takut pada pemerintahan Trump, dan dia tidak bersedia berdebat lagi dengan presiden ke depannya.
And what we've seen now is a number of the president's supporters, a large part of his base, a religious part of his base, pushing back against both his comments against the Pope and also the AI-generated image that you mentioned.
Yang kita lihat sekarang adalah sejumlah pendukung presiden. Sebagian besar dari basis masanya menantang komentarnya terhadap Paus dan juga gambar hasil AI tersebut.
Riley Gaines, who's one of the president's most loyal conservative sort of supporters and commentators as well, kind of said she didn't understand why the president made those remarks and posted that image.
Riley Gaines, salah satu pendukung konservatif paling setia presiden, mengatakan dia tidak mengerti mengapa presiden melontarkan komentar itu dan mengunggah gambar tersebut.
Even foreign allies like Giorgia Meloni of Italy said it was unacceptable to go up against the pontiff in this way.
Bahkan sekutu luar negeri seperti Giorgia Meloni dari Italia mengatakan bahwa menyerang Paus dengan cara seperti ini tidak dapat diterima.
There's other pushback, of course, that the White House is feeling, namely from NATO allies regarding Donald Trump's decision to blockade Iranian ports to try to get control.
Tentu saja ada tekanan lain yang dirasakan Gedung Putih, yakni dari sekutu NATO terkait keputusan Donald Trump memblokade pelabuhan Iran.
The Strait of Hormuz, which doesn't appear to be entirely successful at the moment. How keenly will the White House be to get them back on side?
Upaya menguasai Selat Hormuz saat ini tampaknya tidak sepenuhnya berhasil. Seberapa keras upaya Gedung Putih untuk mendapatkan dukungan mereka kembali?
Well, I think this is going to be another example of watching how the president reacts to his NATO allies. Obviously, throughout this conflict, he's kind of spared no mercy in railing against them. Last week, during his meeting with Mark Rutte, Secretary General, he sort of made his frustrations known, and Rutte said that the president was clearly disappointed. I think it's going to be interesting to watch as this week carries on, and we've seen that Keir Starmer and Emmanuel.
Saya pikir ini akan menjadi contoh lain untuk melihat bagaimana Presiden bereaksi terhadap sekutu NATO-nya selama konflik ini. Dia tidak segan-segan mengecam mereka.
Emmanuel Macron set to host that summit in Paris to discuss how to reopen the strait. But I think we should be watching closely to see how the president continues to rail and sort of how the alliance have left him again unsupported when it comes to this blockade.
Keir Starmer dan Emmanuel Macron dijadwalkan menjadi tuan rumah KTT di Paris untuk membahas cara membuka kembali selat tersebut.
Congress is back this week, and yet still the issue of funding for the Department of Homeland Security hasn't been resolved. Where are we at with that, Shrey?
Kongres kembali bekerja minggu ini, namun masalah perdanaan untuk Departemen Keamanan Dalam Negeri DHS masih belum terselesaikan. Bagaimana situasinya?
It's the saga that never really seems to end on Capitol Hill. It's obviously the 9th week now of this funding lapse to the Department of Homeland Security, the longest partial shutdown on record. Right now,
ini adalah saga yang seolah tidak pernah berakhir di Capitol Hill. Sekarang sudah minggu ke-9 berhatinya perdanaan, penutupan parsial terlama dalam sejarah.
Waiting to see whether the House essentially takes up this Senate-passed bill to fund the TSA, the Coast Guard, Federal Emergency Management Assistance, FEMA.
Saat ini kita menunggu apakah DPR akan mengambil alih RUU yang disahkan Senat untuk mendanai TSA dan FEMA.
And get that passed so those agencies can be essentially reopened. House Republicans are really hoping to make sure that they can pass funding for immigration enforcement, which is notably left out of that funding bill I just mentioned.
Partai Republik di DPR
in a larger reconciliation package down the line. That package doesn't need to meet the filibuster threshold, so it can be passed by a simple majority. So
Partai Republik di DPR berharap bisa memastikan pendanaan untuk penekanan imigrasi yang jelas-jelas tidak dimasukkan dalam RUU pendataan tersebut.
The top Republican leadership, John Thune and Mike Johnson, are hoping to get that ICE and CBP funding passed through that and hopefully assuage some of their more hardline members who say that Senate bill to fund the TSA essentially hands Democrats a victory.
Pimpinan berharap pendanaan ISI dan CBP dapat lolos melalui paket rekonsiliasi sehingga bisa disahkan dengan suara mayoritas sederhana.